let's move into the service. Let's not take a secondary position moving out of Easter. I don't want you to take a secondary position. I don't want a secondary position. I want us to move right into what God is doing and flow in what He's wanting us to flow in. So let's look at the left hand of God. Let's look at the left hand of God. So I want to break a few things down for you. In the Bible, the left hand generally symbolizes a secondary position. Now, let me give a disclaimer right out of the gate, because I don't want you, if you're left-handed, I'm not picking on you. If you're left-handed, you are not substandard. You are not old hat, and you are not a secondary position. I will get to that in just a minute. So don't leave here with your feelings hurt because I said something that I didn't say. So in the Bible, the left hand generally symbolizes a secondary position. It symbolizes judgment. So let's look at the right hand. The right hand represents authority, power, and blessing. So as we move out of Easter, let's not move into a place of judgment, but in a place of authority. Let's not move into a place of secondary, but let's move in a place of sonship and daughtership. See, what I want us to understand is Christ didn't die on the cross for us to celebrate once a year. He died on the cross so He could raise again on the third day and conquer death, hell, and the grave once and for all, for us to walk in this freedom all the time. So let's continue to remember the right hand represents authority. And did we ever notice that the Son is seated at the right hand of the Father? So right-handedness is associated with honor and favor. Left-handedness symbolizes earthly or material possessions sometimes. So when we look at this, it's like, okay, let's look at the left hand and the right hand. Matthew chapter 25, verse 33. And He will place the sheep on the right, on His right, but the goats on the left. So what does this mean and what does this represent? Well, goats basically are those that do not receive salvation. Those that reject salvation. Sheep are always referred to as followers of Jesus. You know what? Those of us in the house, there's a lot of us who went from a goat to a sheep. A lot of us. And some of you in here, you may still be a goat. That means you haven't changed your identity yet. You haven't allowed the Lord to forgive you of your sins. Salvation is going from a goat to a sheep. So He says, those not receiving salvation are going to be on the left. Because see, the left is judgment. The left is a secondary position. In other words, there's a divine judgment that comes on those who do not receive salvation. And it's like, well, that's pretty harsh. I don't make the rules. I just preach them. God says, look, this is how it is. Either you know me or you don't know me. And where you spend eternity will be your choice. It's not random selection. It is not a predestination. It is, or in other words, it's not I picked them and didn't pick them. We're all predestined. We are pre-designed to know the Lord. Whether we receive that or not, it's up to us. So you have that decision that you can make. So He says, if you don't make that position, you will be on the left hand, the hand of judgment. Now, the right hand is a hand of favor. See, the sheep know my voice, the sheep hear my voice, and the sheep follow me. So you see the difference between the right hand and the left hand. Genesis chapter 48, verse 14. And Israel. Now, this is Israel, the man, not the nation. This is Jacob. His name has been changed to Israel. And Israel stretched out his hand and laid on the head of Ephraim. These are Joseph's sons. Ephraim is not the oldest. He's the youngest. The oldest always got the blessing, the birthright. Israel stretched out his hand and he laid it on the head of Ephraim. Joseph brought his sons. Here's the here is the oldest and here is the youngest. And he said this. Ephraim was the youngest, or the younger, and on his left hand was Manasseh. Or on his left hand he placed on Manasseh. And he crossed his hands. In other words, I'm going to give the firstborn blessing to the youngest, not the oldest. So what he was saying, see, the right hand symbolized authority. It symbolized favor. It symbolized blessing. It symbolized passing on that mantle of authority to the oldest. And he's like, no. And then we find out later on, the tribe of Manasseh didn't even enter the promised land. So we find out a little while later, he places that greater blessing upon the younger son and the lesser blessing upon the older son. And Joseph's like, no, Father. And he's like, I know what I'm doing here. Move my hand. No, I know what I'm doing. Don't move my hands around. So the younger son instead receives the blessing, the authority, the favor instead of the older. This was a secondary position as compared to a favored position. The left hand is often described as government. Government is the left hand. The law is the left hand. Sometimes it's like, well, we can't do that. I'll give you a really good example. The law is you go through the line on Wednesday night, you get your meal, and you don't come back until everybody's been served. That's the law. But if you're a kid and you go up there, you know what they're going to say? Pastor said, let the kid have whatever he wants. Now, if you're an old man like me, it's like, no. Get your hind end back over there and sit down. Years ago, somebody was in there and somebody told a kid, I just happened to be standing there, said, no, you can't have seconds. I'm like, wait, what? You can't have seconds, you got to wait. I'm like, give them seconds. They're a kid. They're starved to death. Have you ever seen a kid that wasn't starved to death after school? I don't care. Well, there won't be enough, then I won't eat. You give that kid all they want, because sometimes the law is the left hand and grace is the right hand. And you know what? I'm not going to let the law supersede the grace. So in other words, the law says you can't eat. Pastor says you can if you're under a certain age. I don't know about teenagers. I'm going to have to draw the line there, because there wouldn't be anything for anybody if we didn't make them wait. So we're going to kind of hang on there. So here's what the right hand represents. The right hand represents the church that is saving souls. That's what the right hand represents. The left hand represents the judgment that we walk in. You know how many of us walked into a church at Easter and then walked out and then walked right back into the same law of judgment over our hearts and our minds and walked ourselves right into the same old prison? Instead of walking in the victory that the Lord has for us, walking in freedom, we walked right back into the same old enslavement. Because that's exactly the mindset the devil wants us to have. Those people don't want you. You're not included in that group of people. I said here, we were praying here just a little while ago, and everybody here praying, we're all hands on. These are craftsmen working on the new building. And more of them as well. And I just start crying. I'm like, do you realize what God's done? God has taken a building and put a bunch of rejects over there to build it. Come on. And it looks beautiful. It's wonderful. You know what? Here's what's so cool. These same people would have said a few years ago, I'll never step foot in one of those churches in my life. Come on. Bunch of judgmental freaks. All they're going to do is judge people. You know what? All they want to do is talk about me. You know, and now you're sitting there saying, it ain't like that. You know what? It's real. God is real. And you know what? People are going to chase after the Jesus or not chase after the Jesus they see in us. So let's be very careful. So anyway, let's get back to the left hand. So Proverbs chapter 3, verse 16. Long life is in her right hand. Now we're talking about wisdom. And in her left hand are riches and honor. So wisdom has a gender. Wisdom is always referred to as her. So long life is in her right hand, and the left hand are riches and honor. And you say, well, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. But let me show you the lesser blessing. The right hand represents long life, and the left hand represents possessions. Possessions are not the greater blessing. A good, healthy, long life is the greater blessing. The one that impacts people. See, in her right hand is long life. That is honor. That is power. That is a good name is rather to be had than great riches. In the left hand is good things, riches. But it's not better than the greater blessing. Matthew chapter 6, verse 3. But when you give, now this is talking about giving. This is talking about giving, not taking, not receiving, but giving. When you give to the needy, now this is, let's just say money. When you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. See, because they are contrast to one another is the reason. So in other words, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, because the left hand mentality speaks out of a place of judgment. The left hand mentality speaks out of a place of judgment. The right hand mentality speaks out of a place of grace. The left hand mentality will say, you can't do that. You can't afford that. You won't have enough. The right hand speaks out of grace. Because when we're talking about giving, let's not let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. In other words, it symbolizes there needs to be a secrecy. There needs to be a secrecy where the left hand is concerned. In other words, if someone is walking in just constant judgment of everybody, I'm probably going to keep things from that person. But if they're walking in full grace in everything that they do, I'm probably going to tell them as much as I can so they can be praying over these people. You know, it's like, well, this person got in trouble. Let's just say they got in trouble and something happened and nobody needs to know about it. I'm going to try to let this person know to pray for them, but this person will keep it secret. I'm not going to let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, because the right hand operates in grace, the left hand operates in judgment. This is like little New York anymore. You ever notice that? Yeah. It's like, seriously, it's like, it must be bad. I mean, it gets bad. But anyway, and I would say something right there. I just got to say this. There was a body discovered in White County last week. One of our church attendees found that body. So in case you didn't know, I'm not going to say any more than that. And I'm like, oh man, are you kidding? So it's like everybody's talking about it. Walked up on him and found it. So anyway, he didn't find it in his freezer or anything. So I just want to make sure you know that part. So that's very, very important. You know, you didn't find the body in your freezer. So, or your friend's freezer. So for that matter, but. I heard my wife say something. So what's happening right now is her foot's starting to do this. She's starting to get nervous. But anyway, it is what it is. But anyway, let's move on. So we're having fun. So let's talk about this. I just want to make sure if you're left-handed, you don't feel like you're substandard. Well, he's talking about, boy, I tell you what, I ain't going back to that church anymore because I'm left-handed. Let's talk about the power in the left hand. Judges chapter 20, verse 16. Among all of those were 700 chosen men who were left-handed. Every one of them could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. I want you to know that even the best of us in this house can shoot a bullet through a scope and not hit a hair half the time. So you say, oh, I could. Oh, you can't. Not every time. You're not that good. You think you are. But the deer is this big. His mass is this big. You can't miss it, right? But try to hit one hair on him every single time. This is how good these left-handed warriors were. 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 2. Warriors. These are the same warriors that could use either the right hand or the left hand and sling stones or shoot arrows. These are SEAL Team 6 guys. These are the best of the best. So in other words, the word makes sure that we see that it doesn't matter what hand you are. It matters what mentality you are. So Let's talk about one of these guys who was left-handed. And we're going to jump in here and look at this. We're going to move on. Judges chapter 3, verse 15 and 16. If you skip over the book of Judges, you're doing yourself an injustice, because it's like short stories of the judges that God placed over to lead Israel. And some of them are jacked up and some of them are awesome. But God chose these people. And let's look at this one guy. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up for them a deliverer. And his name was Ehud. He was the son of Gerah, the Benjaminite. He was a left-handed man. And the people of Israel sent tribute to him, by him, to Eglon, the king of Moab. Let's break this down just a minute. Moab is the enemy. And Moab has basically authority. Pretty much he has overthrown Israel because they're so wicked. God just gave them over to their enemies, and for 18 years they've been ruling over them. So they've been oppressing them. Can't do anything. Can't walk outside. Can't marry your wife, unless or should already be married to your wife. Can't marry your future wife unless they say you can. Just all these kinds of things. So God raised them up a deliverer after 18 years, and Ehud made for himself a sword with two edges. Here's the thing: when you're being oppressed by another government, by another kingdom, and you're under their rule, they're going to occupy all of your towns, all of your cities. Israel does not have their own blacksmiths. The only way that you could get, you had to go to the Moabite blacksmith to get your hoe sharpened or something like that, but you're not getting a sword. So there's not going to be a rebellion raising up. So in other words, they don't even have their own blacksmith. But what Ehud does is makes a sword himself, makes his own sword. And he makes it with two edges. That's very important. It's two-edged. And it was about 18 inches in length, and he bound it on his right thigh under his clothes. So in other words, he was left-handed, and he put it over here. So in other words, if you're going to draw your sword, you're going to draw it from the opposite side. You're not going to draw your sword because it's not like the old West, not like a pistol. So you can't pull it up out of here and get it out. You have to pull it from this direction. So he had to bind it over on this side. And he presented, and Ehud made for himself a sword. In verse 17, and he presented the tribute to the Eglon the king. In other words, the people are scared to death. And we want to pay the king just basically feed his ego. Now, you're our leader, Ehud. We want you to take all of this wealth and give it to him so he could treat us even worse. So Ehud presented the tribute to Eglon, the king of Moab. Now, Eglon was a very fat man, the word says. And when Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, in other words, he brings all this stuff, and he sent away the people who carried it. It was so much they had to carry it in. He dismisses them, but he himself turned back to the idols near Gilgal and said, see, this is a pagan place, and he said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he commanded silence, the king did, and all of his attendants went out from his presence. Verse 20, and Ehud came to him as he was sitting alone in the cool of his roof chamber. He don't realize that they're about to pull the plug. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And he arose from his seat, and Ehud reached out his left hand, and he took the sword from his right thigh, because they checked him and they didn't think he would be left-handed. And when they checked him, there was nothing on his left side. So he snuck this thing in on his right side, and he thrust it into the belly of this king. And the hilt, the back of it, went so far in after the blade, the fat closed over the blade, for he did not pull the sword back out. He just left it there, and the dung came out. So in other words, he stabbed him right through his intestines. Then Ehud went out to the porch, and he closed the doors of the roof of the chamber and locked them behind him. Now, this dude's cool. This dude is cool. I just walk right out, lock the doors, mind my own business. And when he had gone, the servants came, and when they saw the door was locked to the roof of the chamber, they thought, surely the king is relieving himself in the closet of the cool of the chamber. In other words, he's gone to the bathroom. And they waited until they were embarrassed. In other words, I'm embarrassed to have to go in there. The king's a pretty good sized dude. Does he need help or something? It's going to be embarrassing. And we've waited too long. And they went in and got a key, opened the door. And there they found their lord, or the king, dead on the floor. Ehud escaped and delayed. Because they delayed, Ehud escaped. And he passed beyond the idols and escaped to Sarah. Okay, so notice something in verse 15. He was left-handed. The word tells us that he was left-handed. In verse 16, he strapped the sword to his right side. So in other words, he tricked everybody. Nobody's expecting a left-handed dude to come walking up in there with a sword. They're especially not expecting the oppressed to come in there with an attack mindset. So this is the tactic of the left of him using his left hand. He reached across his body in verse 21 and he stabbed the king. In other words, I'm going to make sure that I take care of the problem that is oppressing us. Now, this King Eglon went to other enemies of Israel and said, team up with me because I'm going to attack them and I'm going to take over and I'm going to take over their entire nation. I'm going to oppress them, and did this for 18 years. After a while, it's like, look, you get tired of asking if you can go to the bathroom. You get tired of asking if you can plant a garden. You get tired of asking if you get tired of the oppression. You get tired of the slavery. You get tired of the bondage. So you get tired of it. And Ehud, remember, God raised up a deliverer. And Ehud took care of the problem. Now, with that mentality, let's move this conversation forward. Let's move it to the Garden of Gethsemane. So let's go there. John chapter 18, verse 10. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, he drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear, and the servant's name was Malchus. Okay, so let's look at this just a second. So we've got Peter acting in judgment. We've got Peter taking over a situation in his own mindset. Could it be that Peter was left-handed? I'm asking the question. I'm not preaching it. Thus saith the Lord. I'm saying, could it be that he was left-handed? Because what you would do if you were left-handed is you would grab the man, pull your sword out, and cut the right ear off. So there's a reason why he cut the ear off and not stabbed. He could have stabbed him. But instead he cut his ear off, and probably the reason he cut his ear off is it would be a lasting reminder of that person's disobedience. It would be a lasting reminder of their disrespect and their lack of honor for the king. So in other words, if you dishonored the king, you would go around forever because everybody'd see that you had an ear missing, and that was a reminder that the king had been disrespected and you're the one that was at fault. Could it be that he was trying to act in judgment rather than grace? Peter, don't you understand what we've been talking about, the Lord said. Don't you understand this? Could it be that by cutting off the right ear of Malchus, that Peter reached across his right thigh and grabbed the man with his right hand and cut off the right ear and not the left ear? Because if he was right-handed, you would grab the man with your left hand and you'd cut off the left ear. But there's a symbolization also with the right ear. The right ear, when they would take slaves, they would press a rod through the right ear, which symbolized that person was a slave to that person. So there's a lot of symbolism here, and Peter's making sure that he's cutting off the right ear. Was he acting out of a place of judgment, or was he acting out of a place of grace? We'll find that out in a minute. But the word Malchus means this. It means king, or counselor, or my kingdom. So that's what the word means. So that's what the name means. So in other words, I am letting you know that your kingdom is substandard to the Lord's kingdom. Which, that's good. That's a good mentality. But you can't force people to know Jesus. I mean, I wish I could, but I can't. I can't force people to know Jesus. So I can't force you. I can't cut off your ear and make you serve the Lord. And somebody, and I asked this question, and other people may ask this question, why does this guy specifically get mentioned? And after diving as deep as I could go, all I could ever find was that more than likely this guy came to know the Lord later, because it would be like he cut the ear off of that woman, but then when that woman gets saved and becomes a part of the relationship and the fellowship of the Lord, well, he cut the ear off of Tina's ear, So the thing is the Lord picked it up and put it back on. And somebody asked me, somebody said, do you think he touched it and it grew a new ear? Or do you think he picked it up and put it back on? And I said, well, I don't really know. I just know it was fixed. So the Lord fixed the ear. So you don't have to walk around looking like the person who disrespected the king. The person who acted out of, who was a recipient of judgment. So notice something with me. This is so cool. The final healing miracle that Jesus performed was to reattach the ear of a traumatized guy who was just there. So you know what I think? I think Peter chose the guy who couldn't fight back. He didn't choose the guy with the pitchfork or the blade or the torch. He picked the guy that couldn't fight back. In other words, God made sure Malchus was the one whose ear got cut off, because probably he's going to come right on in and be led into this fellowship of believers. But Peter acted in the left hand of judgment. So let's land the plane here and show you what I'm talking about. So we're about finished. Jesus acted in the right hand of grace. Even in the threat of arrest, knowing what he's about to walk into, knowing that he's about to be crucified, nailed on a cross, they say that it was so horrendous that and they made sure that they displayed it all. It was so horrendous and such a terrible death that you would slowly smother to death. I mean, smothering somebody, in a minute or two is one thing, but slowly smothering to death over hours and hours and hours, and the pain and the embarrassment and the shame of it, it scared people to death. So Peter acted in judgment, but yet Jesus acts in grace, even though he knows what he's getting ready to do, what awaits him. So Peter judged the situation and operated out of a place of flesh rather than a place of reasoning. Sometimes we operate out of a place of flesh. Sometimes we operate out of a place of unforgiveness. Sometimes we operate out of a place of, well, that's who that person used to be. Now think about that. I mean, Tina and I have been ministering in this town for 40 years or 35 years. And there's not many of them left, but there's still a lot of people that way. Well, I still remember who he used to be. Weird. You never had one of those things called past, apparently, but I did. Apparently, I'm the only one who had one. So the thing is, we have a past, but yet we act out of a place of judgment and place judgment on the fact that that person cannot be saved by the Lord, cannot walk in forgiveness because I know who they used to be. Well, you just placed yourself as God. You just placed yourself in the place of God and took God out of the equation, because you just said, I know what I can do and I know who that person is and I know what God can't do. God can't forgive that person. You just messed up. See, Peter wanted to remove the enemy threat. Do you know who removed the enemy threat in the Old Testament? Ehud. He removed the enemy threat. But this is not the Old Testament, Peter. And this is not how we act, Peter. Let's look at it. Luke chapter 22, verse 51. But Jesus said, no more of this, stop. And he touched his ear and he healed him. Let's just stop. Let's stop. We can't act this way anymore. So his last act of healing was to heal this man who was there to attack him. That's going to say a whole lot. So let me give you a couple of quotes. Jesus is trying to get each of us to see our situations in grace rather than in judgment. This is what the Lord's trying to do. He's trying to get us to see to get each one of us to see our situations in grace rather than judgment. Maybe the answer isn't to cut away from what threatens, but maybe it's to attach to what remains. See, here's what we're built for. We're built for fight or for flight. And the first thing we want to do when it doesn't go exactly our way is we want to fly. In other words, Easter, man, Easter's great. Everybody goes to church at Easter. I'm going to show up at Easter. It's good. Well, the worship was real good, you know, and the preacher, he looked good in that outfit he had on, you know, and he's the best preacher I ever heard. And you know, and you know what? But I'm done. What do you mean? I'm just not going back. Why? It's just too hard. It's too hard to live. You know what? You know what? I don't know if I could do this every day of my life. Well, you breathe every day of your life. You eat every day of your life. Unless you're Amber Scavo and you never eat. But you do something every day of your life that is a regular routine. You mean you can't serve the Lord and wake up and say, Lord, I just give you thanks today. How about starting with that one? Well, you're asking me to read the Bible. I'm not asking you to do anything. The Lord will ask you that. So you're saying that you would rather cut away from the Lord rather than press in to the Lord. You would rather use your own judgment and say, I can't do this. As opposed to walking with the Lord and saying, you know what? This is great. I'm going to walk with Him. Maybe Jesus is saying this in closing. Stop acting out of emotion. Start acting in grace. Stop acting out of emotion. If we'll start walking in grace, we'll start acting out of grace. If we walk in emotion, we'll keep acting out of emotion. So I'm going to say this. We can make a choice. We can make a choice to continue walking with the Lord, or we can use our own judgment and our own emotions. I can't do this, it's just too hard. You mean I got to pray? You don't have to do anything. But you want to talk to the person you're closest to. I mean, we're dog owners again. And I sit there and I think to myself, do I talk to that dog more than I talk to the Lord? Because here's what she's going to do that the Lord doesn't do. She's going to make sure she gets our attention. What are you doing? Well, I was reading until you got in my face and sat on my chest. So now, God's not going to do that. God's going to want us to do that. So you know what? He wants us to say, what are you doing? Well, I was running the universe. I just want to be right here on top of you right now. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. And if you get out here during the day and you get busy and you didn't pray, there's 5-6 hours went by and I didn't pray. You're not going to hell. You know what? I prayed this morning when I left and I just now laid my head down to go to bed at 10 o'clock. I haven't prayed all day long. You're not going to hell. I'm telling you. Don't make serving the Lord complicated. Just walk with Him. Just walk with Him. It ain't hard. Stop acting out of emotion and start acting out of grace. So I'm going to ask you to stand with us. It's after Easter, and I don't know of a better time to walk with the Lord. I don't know a better time to press in with the Lord. I don't know a better time to say, I am all in with Jesus. Now is the time when it starts. So I want to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes. I want to ask you this simple question. It's after Easter. Are you going to fight or are you going to fly? Are you going to walk in judgment or are you going to walk in grace? It's after Easter. Are you the left hand or are you the right hand? Are you the goat or are you the sheep? Because I want you to know this. It is important how God sees you is very important. It's way more important than how you see God. Because how He sees you determines where you spend eternity. How you see Him determines the power you walk in here. So let's make sure He sees us as a sheep and not a goat. So I want to ask you to pray a prayer with me out loud. And let's just pray it like this. Follow after me. Dear Jesus, I do realize this, that it's after Easter, but you're still risen. You're still God. You're still King. And you want to run my life. You want to be head of operations. And I want to let you do that. So I'm going to ask you into my heart. I invite you into my heart, Lord, to be my King, to be my Lord, to be my Savior, to watch over me, to guide me. Forgive me of my sins, Lord. I repent of my sins. I receive your free gift of grace and salvation. In your name I pray.